President Trump is now in the Netherlands for a NATO summit that's supposed to be focused on how much member countries spend on defense, as well as prospects for peace in Ukraine. However, those goals are being overshadowed somewhat by the continued dispute between Israel and Iran. Earlier today, Trump expressed his frustration with both countries after the two sides accused each other of violating a ceasefire deal. Trump is still confident the U.S. attacks on Iranian nuclear sites were successful.
And Iran's not going to have a nuclear weapon, by the way. I think it's the last thing on their mind right now. They're not going to have enrichment, and they're not going to have a nuclear weapon, and they know that.
Israeli officials say an Iranian missile strike killed at least 4 people and injured multiple others shortly before the ceasefire was set to take effect. Prime Minister Netanyahu's office also says Israel intercepted a missile after the ceasefire took hold. Senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe is outside The Hague for today's NATO summit. Ed, so good to see you. President Trump announced the ceasefire last night, but it looks like it was in danger soon after. What's come out of the White House since then, particularly with conversations with Israel?
Well, you saw the president's angry response this morning as he left the White House en route here to the Netherlands. He's just landed a little while ago, so we may get fresh comment from him now that he's on the ground. What we do know is that he spent his roughly 7-hour flight here working the phones and using his social media to make the point that that ceasefire better hold. He spoke with the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, and made clear that he wants to see Israel stop attacking Iran. The White House says the Israeli leader got the message. He also used Truth Social to say that Israel would not be bombing Iran as it might have been planning to, that instead planes would be turning around. And he said that Iran would never have a nuclear program. All of that comes as he's come here to the Netherlands for only about 20 hours or so to attend the annual NATO summit, one that's been built around his biggest priority when it comes to this military alliance, and that is getting each member to eventually pay as much as 5% of its GDP towards their military. It's something has been talking about since he was a presidential candidate back in 2016, and now, just in the last several weeks, the alliance has agreed to do this, in part because they realize that the threat from Russia remains so urgent. You mentioned the idea that this might be overshadowed by what's going on in Iran. I would say it's certainly something they're aware of. It's certainly something that may come up in conversation, but this alliance, given where it's focused here in Europe, away from the Middle East, is far more concerned about what the president may be saying or doing regarding that war in Ukraine.
And Ed, speaking of the agenda for this NATO summit, what else can we expect to come out of the summit?
So we will get them to officially agree to spend 5% of their GDP on defense, fulfilling a major goal of the president, one that he'll justifiably and legitimately be able to come home and say, I got them to do this. The other thing we're waiting to hear about is who else is he going to meet with. Tonight he's having dinner with the King and Queen of the Netherlands and the Dutch Prime Minister and the leaders of the member nations. Tomorrow he's expected to hold a handful of one-on-one meetings. We just don't know yet with whom. The one to watch for is whether he meets with Volodymyr Zelensky. He was supposed to meet with him last week at the G7 in Canada. He canceled that meeting in order to go back to Washington and focus on the situation in Iran. If they make up for it this week, that would certainly be welcome news for NATO members. And we'll see who else he might speak with. But then he's going right back, and we'll be back in Washington if the schedule holds by dinner time tomorrow night. An acknowledgement that this was an important meeting to attend, but that, as we've pointed out, there are other major foreign policy challenges facing him.
We know you'll stay on top of it. Ed O'Keefe reporting for us from the Netherlands. Ed, thank you. Good to see you.